On this week's Extra Ordi-Nerdy, we discuss Maslow's hierarchy of geeks, better known as Why Does Everybody Hate Furries?
Maslow rocks.
So, gentlemen, we are in a situation here. This situation is fans like to pretend that they live in this egalitarian wonderland, and that could not be more wrong. Would you agree?
I agree, and it's unfortunate.
I concur.
In all seriousness, so, as a second-generation science fiction fan growing up, the top of the heap were the writers. Like, oh, if you went to a science fiction convention in the 80s or 90s, you went there because you wanted to meet the people that wrote your books. And they're kind of halfway down in the middle these days, and they're certainly not getting everything comped and paid the way the actors are. Instead, at the top now, we've got the actors that are in movies. If you're Tom Hiddleston, just go ahead. Doesn't matter what you want, people will do it. Then you've got the actors on TV. We still love us some Farscape, you know? It doesn't really matter what show you're on. If you've been on the Sci-Fi Network, someone is going to pay for your autograph. There's no question about that. Yeah. Then you've got the writers. They're still there. They're just, you know, kind of underneath the media people. I would say next under that would be artists, probably. Like, we have a lot of respect still in fandom for getting down to the fan level, people that have created things.
And that's usually the majority of the vendors then.
Yeah. Then you get into cosplayers of any type, because again, with the whole respecting people that have actually made something, it's such a huge part of fanish culture is to make something from scratch that you created.
For sure. Yeah.
And then you start getting into the specific fandoms. I think, and we're just going to go through the list and then we'll dissect them all, I think it goes Star Wars, all other Star Trek science fiction all other science fiction and fantasy TV shows, Star Trek, Steampunk, anime, and furries at the very bottom.
Poor furries.
Okay, before we get into the whole hierarchy of the rest of them, what did furries do? Did furries, like, murder someone's mom?
They might have been on bath salts and...
They might have banged somebody's mom to make them that angry. If you look at the LeBron James effect.
But I think that's actually the thing where with furries, like, there is that... People assume that they relate furries with some type of, like, sexual deviant behavior. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the reason why they get labeled that way.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's true or not, that's the label that's been bestowed upon them.
See, I find that a little bit weird. Yes, but I still find it weird because, like, I've seen fursuits, I've been to conventions. I don't think you can even pee in those. Not like if you've got, like, a little urethra setup going on inside your suit, which is none of my business, but it looks like something you would have to take the whole thing off to do anything with. So that would actually make it really difficult to assault someone. Like, you stay right there. I'm going to be with you momentarily, and then bad things are going to happen.
Where'd you go?
I don't see that happening, you know?
Yeah.
And the guys that I've met that are furries tend to be socially awkward and tend to be of the opinion that, you know, nobody's going to like them as who they are. So if you put on this happy mask, like, I'm a fox now, everybody likes foxes because it's cute and it's smiling, then it'll all be okay.
Yeah.
And that's how and a lot of them don't even talk. Like, they just want to interact and smile and wave and whatnot.
I don't know if it helps.
Well, that's why we don't know what the fox says.
But these are the people we've demonized. These are the ones that, for some reason, with fandom having this misleading pretend culture of it doesn't matter how weird you are, like weird pride, unless you're a furry. So, yeah. Oh.
Well, weird people got to think that something's weird. And I guess it
guess.
just happens to be furries.
Here's the thing that's funny to me. It's been furries for like 30 years. It was furries in the 80s. It's still furries today.
Yeah.
How can any one group have that kind of staying power with their place in the hierarchy?
I think it just self-perpetuates. Because I guess, like, when people get into whatever fandom they are, they're like, oh yeah, this is cool, you know, you want to check this out, but stay away from those guys, you know? And I think it's just like, it's just kind of been going on in that same way. And also with the idea that people have about furries, like their preconceived notions, it's like that's definitely not doing them any favors.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, that's what you're into, then you'd be like, oh yeah, I'll totally stay away.
And then you have mascots like Pedo Bear, not really, only exacerbating.
I don't really think
the image.
I don't really think the people dressing up as Pedo Bear are actual furries, though. I think those are people that are making fun of that.
Possible, but you can never explain that to hate mongers of the sort that have something against furries. We're just like, oh, I'm being ironic. Like, well, where do you want to get punched in the balls or in the face? It makes no difference what your point is.
So,
no, but yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a pretty clear hierarchy with other fandoms, though. We know who's on bottom. There's no question of who's on bottom. And I apologize, furries, but in case it's a surprise to you, you're it.
And you're not a power bottom either.
I knew you were going to go with that.
So within fans, you've got Star Wars, as I said, all other science fiction TV, Star Trek, steampunk, anime, and we're not going to talk about the furries. So why do you guys think that these people got the rankings they do as far as like what is considered the cool fandom to be in and what's considered like really, you're still watching Star Trek?
Well, with the actors and the TV stars, I mean, those ones are pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah,
It's like, we have a culture that's very celebrity obsessed. So automatically those are going to be the people that everybody looks for. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I want to be. I want to be on TV all the time.
Yeah.
I want to be Nathan Fillion because he's so charming.
Oh, it's Carol from Walking Dead,
Yeah.
two other cast members from Walking Dead. That's like
Carl.
that's the it show. That's the it show right now. So, whenever you have an it show for that year and they're going to be at your convention, best believe there's going to be lines there.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to meet those people and take pictures with them.
But within fandom itself, I feel that as far as like what the fans are doing with other fans and not just the celebrities, there's a pretty clear hierarchy. I feel like Star Wars is definitely in ascendance right now, and these things change over time. Like Star Wars, man, they're on top of the heap.
Yeah.
And we've discussed this a little bit before as far as like why Star Wars is on top of the heap. You were telling me that you think it's because they've got such a huge sense of community.
Yeah, there's a huge sense of community, and it's and the biggest thing I don't think I touched on before, but it's the iconography behind Star Wars. Stormtroopers are some of the most recognizable figures out there, along with R2-D2. R2-D2 in general is just very cute and adorable.
Yeah.
So that's definitely like a chick magnet as far as that goes. And then when you actually talk to the people that make the R2s, if you like technology stuff, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And you can
Well, that's part of the maker culture thing that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah,
where, like, if you're actually creating something. One of the other things was, when you were saying the Stormtroopers, though, here's my thing with Stormtroopers. I don't understand why they're as popular as they are, because the whole premise of Stormtroopers is that you're a child army of clone slaves. Who aspires to be that?
May the Force be with you. I'd like to point out that a lot of people don't really like to acknowledge the new trilogy. Because they were terrible. I'm sorry. If you liked it, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you had to go through those movies.
But, okay, I understand where you're coming from with that. But when I tell people I'm not that into Star Wars because I'm not a princess or a prostitute, and George Lucas made it pretty clear that I am not part of his vision, so I'm going to go hang out in the Trek land where people would allow me to actually do anything in life, their immediate response is, well, you're only basing it on the original trilogy. Look, you've got to take into consideration the new movies and the expanded universe. You can't have it both ways! You can't say, you should get into it because of the expanded universe, and then at the same time say, we're just going to ignore child slavery.
Okay, how about just the original trilogy, the expanded universe, and not the new prequel? Everything else is fair game. But I think that's the thing. I think it's, I'm glad you brought up the expanded universe. I think that's one of the reasons why Star Wars has been so prevalent. Because, they made 3 movies, and it's lasted for decades. And it's because people have taken this universe, and they've just added onto it through movies, or through video games, through TV shows, through books.
Through toys.
Yeah.
That's one of the areas where Star Wars has won over Star Trek, hands down. Like, everything's designed for kids, as you said, as far as, like, making things that are super kid-friendly to begin with. That was clearly a strategic thing. And they've kept those toy licenses going for year after year after year. Whereas Star Wars was like, I don't know, I might put out a phaser every now and then, or like some collector plate with Captain Picard on it. They're not really getting out there and making the toys something that people desperately want. Like, when I was growing up, nerd, I really wanted to not only have a laser tag set, like the type you can put on and play with your friends, I wanted a Star Trek laser tag set. This does not exist. I wanted this to exist so badly so we could be chasing each other around with phasers and have a Starfleet uniform. And why didn't they make that? There was, not anymore, because people don't like Star Trek as much as they used to, but at the time they could have made so much money off of that.
Oh, definitely. So
much money.
I think that's the thing. They weren't really geared towards merchandising the way Star Wars was. Like you mentioned, like everything was geared towards making toys. I mean, again, going back to the prequels, that's one of the reasons why they were so terrible, because that's all they cared about. Was like, oh yeah, kids are going to love pod racing. Let's go with pod racing.
Yeah. So Star Wars is on top, though. We can all agree with that. It doesn't, even though there's relatively little product out there. I mean, Star Trek has years and years of series, but with Star Wars, it's mostly that original trilogy, which has kept its classic feel very well, I feel. Whereas Star Trek is always kind of a product of its era.
Oh, yeah.
So you watch the original ones, and you're like, oh man, did they put that hoarded together out of like paper mache and bad intentions? I can make a better one. By the way, visit Kitchen Overlord. I have made a better one, and you can eat it.
Nice
product placement. And then with the next generation, it's so 80s. Oh my goodness! Like I've got that nostalgia thing. Like I remember when, but it's so 80s. And then they just didn't do very well with anything after that. Like DS9 actually did pretty well. That went on for years.
Yeah, but those also kind of ran concurrently, though.
No, there was only a 1 or 2 year overlap.
Oh, was there? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
DS9 ran concurrently with Babylon 5.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Space hotels. We need several of them, apparently. But yeah, so I feel like Star Trek fell out of ascendancy because there wasn't really any good Trek on TV to watch. And a lot of that lost Roddenberry's original vision as far as being like this utopian future where everything could go well, etc. And they were trying to just make it compete with a lot of things that it wasn't. And so the later series, I mean, I liked Voyager, but it just wasn't as inspiring as it could be. And by the time they got to Enterprise, like, no.
Then came the movies, and that made everything perfect, right?
Incredible.
The new movies. The problem with the new movies is J.J. Abrams J.J. Abrams so clearly wanted to make a Star Wars movie. And congratulations, J.J., now you get to.
Yeah, he's got the resume experience.
But it really ruined those Star Trek movies. They weren't Star Trek movies by the time you were done. There was a lot of pandering fan service, like we're just going to repeat a line or repeat a scene. It wasn't anything new or original. Oh, yeah. Even the Space Whales were more original than that, J.J., come on! I sat through Space Whales more than once. Yeah, so anyway, Star Trek might come back if it ever gets back on television, because it does still have all of that, but it just feels dated. Like, Klingons are your grandfather's fandom at this point in time. I don't see any new people, like the Klingon Assault Group CAG. They're great people, but I don't see any new people getting into it.
Yeah.
In fact, I think everybody I know that's in CAG is over 40, and most of them are over 50. Which, by the way, there are fans over 50 out there.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Oh, good.
No, I said they're there.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, yeah, I think that's the thing with Star Trek is, like you said, I mean, the last one that had this strong following was Next Generation.
Yeah.
And
well, no, DS9 still had a pretty strong following.
Yeah. But it's like, there's no, like, there wasn't one that came out, like, 5 years ago that you can say, like, oh, yeah, we're really into this one. So, I think that's one of the reasons why I guess they're lower on the hierarchy, because they don't still have, like, that huge community that Star Wars is. Yeah. Star Wars is like a snowball. Like, it's just constantly building. It's like, not even the prequels could slow them down. Yeah. Well, they did slow them down, but not even the prequels could stop them.
And now they're owned by Disney, which I think is going to be the best thing that could happen to those movies. So, these giant media properties, that's great, but I think another thing going on is, so you've got Star Wars, and then under that, I ranked all other science fiction and fantasy television, except for Star Trek, which is its own thing even further down. And the reason I lumped all of it in together is, like, when Star Trek was on the air, there literally was not any other science fiction.
Yeah.
That was it. And when Next Generation was out there, there might have been 1 or 2, but they didn't last. By the time DS9 came around, there was a lot of competition, like Babylon 5, Farscape, I think overlapped them somewhat. And these days, as we've discussed on a different episode, you should check out our CW episode, all of CW is catering to, like, getting women into science fiction and fantasy. The Sci-Fi Channel is a thing that exists, and other than wrestling, also plays some science fiction shows. And there's just so much competition in the market right now that I don't see any one show being a true breakout and being able to step aside and become the next Star Trek, because there's just too many of them, and they appeal to so many different niche markets.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, it's like everyone has, like, their own. There's kind of like a flavor for every type of, like, science fiction show that you would want. Whereas, one day, back in the day, Star Trek reigned supreme.
And I actually think that's fantastic, because as much as I love Star Trek, and I do love me some Star Trek, I also adore Continuum. And if I go to a convention and find one other Continuum fan, we're just going to sit in the corner and be like, oh my god, time travel! And we will be so delighted to have found one another. So this diversification, I think, is actually a really good thing. And that's kind of cool. Because one of the things at conventions, like, part of the reason you dress up is to find your people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
like, if I go to this and people are going to come up and assume that I'm into DC Comics, because what the hell am I dressed as otherwise? If you're dressed as this, well, I don't know if you could pull off this dress as well as I can.
No.
But
I don't have the legs for it.
Thank you. Which no one can see my legs in this. But, you know, if you are a fan of a niche show like that, or even a bigger one like Supernatural, show up in a Supernatural t-shirt, you will find your Supernatural friends. Doctor Who, dear God, the amount of Doctor Who cosplay in there. And that's how you find your friends at a convention. That helps narrow that focus down. That's not a bad thing, in my opinion, as far as finding people that you know you'll have something in common with.
Oh yeah, I think that's one of the best parts about conventions. You know, you go there, it's like, especially for me, like, I go to a lot of comic conventions, but I'm always looking for the Game of Thrones people.
Yeah.
So it's like, I see a dire wolf, I'm going to go talk to that person. So yeah, it's a great way. It's like, it already has the conversation starter, you know, for you're like right there.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Browncoats, but you guys fall in the category with all other science fiction TV. 13 episodes, it just wasn't that much. It was great, don't get me wrong, I love it. There's a Firefly week on Kitchen Overlord, if you want to go find some great recipes for it, I got my love, but it's just not gonna break out above and beyond Star Wars never. It's never gonna happen.
It's always gonna be the show that could have been, but never was.
So underneath all of that, which is the primary way that I think people find one another at conventions now, is like, oh hey, you've got a Direwolf shirt on, oh hey, you're Wonder Woman, whatever. There's also anime. Or, well, let's put steampunk above anime, I'm going to say ever so slightly. And yeah. I waffle on whether those two are more equal, but I guess it depends on what part of the country you're in and how each group is behaving at a convention, but
yeah.
Like, steampunk is an older fandom, I find. Like, you get a lot of people over 30, and anime is a lot of under 30, as we discussed in a different episode at length. So yeah, I don't know, as far as ranking those two.
I think it's generally harder to find anime fans. Because steampunk has that crossover appeal. Mm-hmm. Because, like you said, you put some gears, you make it look really cool, and it's like, oh, it's steampunk.
Yeah.
But that crosses over to other characters, so you can do steampunk Thor, steampunk Loki, like they had at Awesome Comic Con, or steampunk Doctor Who, a steampunk TARDIS. So you can actually steampunk is also more of like, I don't know, a verb towards or an adjective for other superhero-y things or pop culture things. Mm-hmm. You can add steampunk to anything, and it's something completely different now. It's like it's a subculture of.
Although I feel like we've hit I actually think we hit peak steampunk a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was always more of a fashion movement than anything else, like, because there's not any core books or movies or anything like that, or comics even that it's around. That stuff has all crept up on the periphery, but it really started as, I like pretty clothes, I'm a goth who discovered brown, or I'm a Ren Fair person who just wants to age it forward a little bit to the late Victorian era instead of just keeping it all Renaissance. Yeah. As long as you can wear a corset, you're pretty happy, is what people are saying, basically. So yeah, but that's definitely, like, they're there. They're in the hierarchy of people. And I think one of the things people do like about steampunk is you've made something. Yeah. But they're never going to be able to reach the level of the Star Wars fans, because a lot of the Star Wars fans are making things like a robot. Yeah. That can move around with your R2-D2 and do its thing.
So you don't have to make it steampunk.
Well, just slap a gear on it. There you go. You got the best of both worlds.
Whereas the thing I don't like about, like, steampunk has this huge maker culture, and fandom loves people that make things, but very little steampunk stuff is functional. Mm-hmm. Most of it is purely decorative. Like, it might as well be a piece of wood that you've planed and drawn some filigree on it and slapped a gear on it. Yeah. So, Then below that, anime. So why do you, sir, being our resident anime lover, believe that anime is only a step above furries on Maslow's hierarchy of geeks?
It's a little tough to say, but it's easy. I'd say it's easy to imagine. Anime, it gets kind of lambasted as either like hentai or fan service, or and stuff that is taken more seriously. Still, like I said in another episode with Ghost in a Shell, it's this deep thought out crime serial.
Never gonna stop talking about
the main character's got a thong, you know, and it's hyper in that sense. It's a depiction of hypersexualization of the future, but it's still fan service.
Yeah.
Like, hey, look, here's these butt cheeks and this nice purple-haired chick. It's like, I'm not complaining, but it's hard for me to sell it for you, producers.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that also makes it really hard for parents, because you've got things like Dragon Ball Z and lots of stuff that is genuinely aimed at kids, but then you've also got hentai. And if you aren't paying that much attention, like the first 5 minutes of just about any of them all looks about the same, because they dress the schoolgirls exactly alike in all of it. Who knows what mystery's coming next?
Yeah.
And so I think that does definitely push it down. Ironically, anime, to me at least, seems to be the fandom that's gaining the most young people the fastest.
Yeah, definitely. You know, there's much more... Well, I think with technology, the way it is, and then, you know, you can find anything on the internet, it's a lot easier to find anime. And so even through local forums and stuff like that, you can find people who also have an affinity for the same things that you like, and it's no different with anime. And now that there's anime conventions of the sort, and you can still find these people at more wide-ranging conventions, although smaller.
Yeah.
And I think it's mostly because, you know, at comic conventions, you're going to find your group of Whovians, and then people who know of it, but then you can sell them on, like, Doctor Who, and sell them on Matt Smith and whatnot. Or even, you know, find your Continuum person.
Me and 7 Canadians love this show.
But it's hard with it's hard with anime, because even, you know, like at Austin Comic Con, you see the booth for the anime stuff, and the guy's dressed up as a Naruto character, and there is nobody getting in line. It's like, hey, let me flag you down and get you to come over here, and it's kind of hard to see, you know, and but yeah, people see, they think of anime and they just think like hyper stylized sex or overly violent cartoon.
And I think that ties back into why the furries are also on bottom. So the two things that we can agree on that are like at the bottom of the hierarchy of geeks are the ones that, fairly or not, and we welcome your comments on this, are associated with kind of pervy sex.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Which is funny, because fandom to me has an awful lot of pervy sex going on. Like, geeks are much more likely to also be into BDSM culture, for example, or also be into, like, you go to science fiction conventions, and at a certain time of night, people are just going to start talking about things that you're like, really? Shouldn't you be talking about that alone in the room with somebody that you're about to do all this with? Because I don't know if I wanted to picture you in that graphic and detail for the middle of your story. Not saying you shouldn't do it. Have fun. I just don't need to hear about it when I'm over here trying to talk to him about Game of Thrones. So, yeah. And it's weird. It's weird with that. With, like, this embrace of alternative sexuality as being superior in every possible way within geek culture, but the things that we hate on the most are the things that portray alternative sexuality.
Yeah.
And that's within the culture. That's not coming from outside. So we would love to get your feedback on this. Are we right? Are we wrong? Are we smoking God only knows what that have no idea what we're talking about? Let's hear it. Do you agree with our hierarchy? Do you agree with our analysis of why people are in that hierarchy?
Sound off in the comments.
Do it.